Hello, and welcome to the December 2024 Preparedness Pantry Kitchen Table Chat. One of the things that I realized I needed to share is about those items that are long-term storage items, the things that we can keep for an extended period of time. And so sometimes if we find a good sale on it, it's worth stocking up on. And the reason I thought about that was because in the front porch community a few days ago, I posted a link to a kosher salt that was flaked. And I love kosher salt. It's a really nice salt. It's not iodized, which of course is great from my perspective because the iodine they use is not as bioavailable as it should be. And it also is a really great salt for a lot of different uses. You can brine with it, you can finish with it, or whatever. Seeing it in flakes was amazing because that just makes it even more versatile. And that kind of got my wheels spinning to think about the things that are long-term storage because it was a 5-pound container of salt that I saw. And it sounds like a lot, but if you use a lot of salt, it's not a bad thing. And one of the beautiful things is that salt is one of those things that does not go bad. So there are certain food items that if you have space for them and if you find a good deal, it's worth stocking up on them because, especially right now, food prices are currently approximately 20% higher than they were at the beginning of the year across most categories, which is just overwhelming for a lot of families. And unfortunately, all of the indicators that I'm seeing in all of the industry newsletters that I get is that it's possibly going to go even higher next year because of imposed tariffs and what that's going to do to the food supply. Now, my hope is that means perhaps that some of our food will come back to the US, which would be great because that would help reduce food miles. However, I don't think that bringing those items back is necessarily going to change the food dollar cost as much because labor costs are higher here. But we'd at least be saving some and we'd have more access. However, that is a totally different topic. One of the things that is really important is to consider, I'm going to give you a list of what all these items are, and I will list them individually in the notes once we post that, to consider keeping track for, say, a month of how much you use these items. And then from there, figure out how much you think you would comfortably be willing to store on hand. For example, one of the things that never goes bad is baking soda. And we actually store a lot of baking soda because although I use a little bit in baking, you need a teaspoon here, a teaspoon there. I do have one waffle recipe that calls for 5 teaspoons. It's a big recipe and it's very fluffy. And I do use it in my bath because I love a good detox bath. And a cup of baking soda is one of the things that you put in there. So I use a fair amount. But some of the other things that you can do with baking soda is to use it, for example, if you have an upset stomach, instead of reaching for Tums or something like that, a lot of times having a little bit of baking soda, it's usually like a half a teaspoon to a half a glass of water, can help if you're having a lot of gas or a lot of bloating, depending on what's causing that. You can also make a paste out of baking soda and put it on if you have bug bites because it is such an alkaline substance that it will draw out the what causes the sting. So it's good for insect bites. It's also really good, by the way, if you have other itchy things. For example, if you happen to get poison ivy or whatever, taking a bath with that could be a good thing. It can be used as a cleaning thing. I know we had one dog in particular. He was a Basset Beagle mix, and he could get a little ripe at times. And so we would sprinkle baking soda on his bedding to help neutralize the odor. Whoop, we lost Renee for a second. She'll be back. So it's good for that. It's also good for scrubbing if you need to clean sinks or things like that. Also good for laundry if you happen to need to balance the pH levels in your laundry, you can throw a half a cup in there. So baking soda is definitely something that we can keep a lot of. Another one in the baking category is cornstarch. Cornstarch does not go bad as long as it is kept in a cool, dry, dark place. So you want to make sure that it's not getting exposed to a lot of moisture. If you live in a very humid area, it's worth it to keep the big container somewhere else and pull from that into the smaller container, because just opening and closing a container does allow some moisture in there, but it keeps for a very, very long time. The other thing that is good forever is honey, which really amazes me. I have read stories of how they have found honey that is literally thousands of years old in the pyramids in Egypt, and it's still good. There is something about honey that it does not go bad. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. So that's another one. And I will share that with honey, the most important thing is to remember that you want to have raw, unfiltered, and if possible, as local as you can get it. And the reason we want local honey is because of the pollens. Honey is one of those fascinating foods that can help with seasonal allergies. And so the way the bees produce the honey somehow helps make the pollen more calming to the system, so that that exposure can actually help reduce how badly your body is exposed to certain things. Now, it has to be obviously the things that the bees are eating from. They're not eating oak or maple or that kind of thing, because those don't make flowers. So if those are things that you're allergic to, local honey may help with other pollens, but may not help with that. But still, it's really good to have. The other interesting thing about honey is that in an emergency, and I don't recommend this on a regular basis, but in an emergency situation, if you had nowhere else and you had some low-level wounds, nothing huge, nothing needing stitches or whatever, but minor cuts, scrapes that have peeled off skin or whatever, you can put a little bit of honey if you had nothing else. I, of course, would prefer that you have Nutrisporin on hand. That's my favorite antibiotic type ointment, but you can put a little honey on and it will help. And of course, I need to mention, I mean, none of us have babies in the house, but we do not give honey to anybody under 1 year of age because it is not healthy for them. Another thing that is can last for a very, very long time, again, cool, dry, dark place, is sugar. And the dry is very important because sugar will crystallize and harden if it gets exposed to too much moisture, but sugar can last for a very, very long time. Another thing is vanilla. And vanilla actually is one that I am looking at trying to find a good source for vanilla beans, because I think the time has come to start making my own again. It will last for years and years and years and years because it's in an alcohol base. And store-bought vanilla is just getting exceedingly expensive. I had to restock at the grocery store for holiday baking, and I was just astonished by the cost. So if you happen to find a deal, or if you want to know how to make it, I will share the link to the blog post with the instructions on how to make it. It's super easy. Basically, you take the bean, you cut it, you scrape it, you put it in, and it depends. Some people use vodka, which is what I use. I know other people who use bourbon. but you want to use a reasonable quality. I made the mistake one year of buying the best quality vodka, like really top shelf stuff, and it did not make a difference. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, we're just looking for the alcohol. So, hey, Sean, good to see you.
Hi, Mira.
We're talking about making your own vanilla and how easy it is.
Okay, cool.
And so you take the scrapings out of the inside of the beans, you take the bean pods and you put them in the alcohol and then let it sit for at least 6 months, giving it a good shake every couple of weeks. And then you can strain it and you can actually take those beans, the bean pods, after they've been in the alcohol, dry them, and then once they're dry, stuff them into a container of vanilla, and they will still have enough fragrance left to make vanilla sugar, which is kind of fun. But it is something that will last for a very long time. And like I said, with holiday baking, I noticed the cost had gone rather high, so that was challenging. Vinegar is another thing that will last for years and years and years. The apple cider vinegar with the mother in it, I will say, depending on how it's stored, the mother can continue to grow if it's very happy. And so that eventually takes up more of the volume, so you may not have as much. White vinegar is typically, we just want to make sure that we're getting the right kind of white vinegar. We want to try and get it that is not GMO. Some vinegar is made from corn. A lot of it is actually. And so we want to make sure it's not genetically modified. Another thing that's really important, if you're someone that uses vinegar for pickling, I want to encourage you to look at the label. You have to be very, very cautious. Lately, they have been, and this started this past summer that I noticed it, they are now selling vinegar that has lower acidity. I'm not sure why. It has to be at least 5% acidity in order to make pickles, but they're selling 4% at the grocery store. So if you're buying a gallon of vinegar because you want to make pickles, you need to make sure that you have the right acidity. Um, and then the other vinegars, rice wine vinegar, red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, those kinds of things, those also should last for a very long time. Vinegar itself is a preserving agent, so it would last for a very long time. While we're speaking of vinegar, I want to just give a little shout out to the fact that we do not store oils for an extended period of time because they just go rancid. I have an interview that I did with Tony Casandrinos, who is the founder and owner of Casandrinos Olive Oil, which is one that I really love. And he does not recommend that you keep oils for more than 6 months. Um, the problem is all the phenols and all the health-giving things that are in there are not preserved by simply leaving them in the bottle for an extended period of time. So we do want to make sure that we're rotating that one. Uh, Obviously, anything that is in, a number 10 can or a pantry size can or whatever, a lot of those are vacuum sealed, so those will last for 25 years. That's where we look and see, can we get a deal? Can we find something? I do like Nutristore. I've started ordering from them. Uh, One of the things that I have been looking at doing is, instead of, I'm still working my way through an enormous container of rice because we eat a lot of rice in our family. We like it. And I'm thinking when we get about halfway through, I will buy another one, but I will probably buy a smaller one for my preparedness pantry, and then I will buy some rice in number 10 cans to have for an extended pantry, because then I don't have to worry about how old it is or storing any enormous. So instead of getting a 25-pound bag of rice, I would probably get a 10-pound bag of rice and then have maybe 2 cans of rice so that if we needed it for an extended period of time, we would have it. The other thing that it can be good for an extended period of time is cocoa powder. Again, it has anything that's a powder or a crystal of some kind. They really need to be stored in a cool, dry, dark place. I know I keep saying that, but I'm just going to keep repeating it because I want to make sure that people know that. And my recommendation really is whatever your bigger container is, to move it into a smaller container that goes into your kitchen so that you're using that all the time. The last time we met, we had a little video. I was showing you some stuff and I happened to open my baking pantry. So I have a bigger container of cocoa powder that's in my preparedness pantry. And then I have a little container that I refill when I need to refill it. So that way it's not getting exposed to light and too much moisture, etc. So it will last longer. Other things that are good to look at having, and these are basic staples that are good to have in a can. And this is one of those things where they sometimes go on sale, so it's worth it to stock up for a little bit, depending on what your family needs are. Would be pasta, if you're someone who can eat pasta. I will say I have not yet found a gluten-free pasta that comes in a number 10 can. So for my family, that is not an option. I could potentially can my own by putting it in a jar with an oxygen absorber and vacuum sealing it. And in the can, it's 25 years. In the jar with the oxygen absorbers, that's usually recommended for about 10 years. If you're someone who drinks tea or coffee, you can also store those for a longer period of time if they're, sealed. Coffee in the brick tends to last longer than coffee that's just loose in a bag. Uh, and with tea, it would be something that you would want to vacuum seal. So you'd want that little vacuum sealer attachment to just make sure that nothing's in there to oxidize. And then the last thing would be oats, is another thing that you can usually get in a number 10 can. And those, if they're in the can, would last for 25 years. I do tend to buy oats about 5 pounds at a time at the from one of my suppliers. And so that's, we used to buy more, but we're not eating that much anymore. But if you are someone who eats a lot of oats, maybe you like oatmeal a few times a week for breakfast, maybe you make a lot of granola, that kind of thing, that can be a good thing to have a couple of those number 10 cans. And again, this is not meant to be, we're not looking to overwhelm ourselves by how much we have in our pantry. But I think sometimes, especially given the increasing cost of groceries and the anticipated continuation of that, it makes sense for us to have our everyday pantry that we use all the time when we cook, our preparedness pantry that is like our 30-day supply in case something happens, and then now to consider stocking up on things that will last for a long time that are a good deal to just have a little bit to help with grocery expenses. And that's today's share. So I would love to know if anybody has any of those cans that you're either using in rotation in your pantry, or if you're just storing them to have them because you prefer fresh food. I'm curious to know who does that. Yes.
I have a question about them. Because I'm going to start rotating them,
Mhm.
how long, once it's opened, will it last?
Great
Like any
question.
regular food?
Yeah, so my understanding is for most of them, it is up to a year as long as you keep the lid on it. I will share, because of where you live, you have a drier climate. It's going to fully last that year. I have seen for some things in the summer in my area, it's too humid, even just opening and closing the container to get things out. So my goal is to, when I get them, if I'm using them in rotation, to open them and package them into quart-sized jars instead of the number 10 can. Because, for example, carrots were fine. They didn't have a problem. Celery was also fine, but bell peppers and some of the fruits and the leafy greens, they did not last as well. I mean, they're still good, but they were a little softer. They weren't as crisp.
So these are freeze dried, right?
Yes. Well, freeze dried or dehydrated.
Oh, um, so when you talk about making soup in a jar, that's with freeze dried food, right? Or can you use these to make soups in a jar too?
Use what to make soups in a jar?
The number 10 freeze dried.
Yeah, so the number 10 freeze dried, yes, that's exactly what I use when I'm making my soups in a jar.
Okay, okay.
And actually, you know what? I have a new recipe that I like that I will share with you in the comments. Um, for making that, it's a veggie soup and it's really good. And then what I do is, so I put it all together and then I just add whatever protein I happen to have on hand from leftovers.
So these would be good for soups too, huh? Just even if I
It would
made
be
soup
great
tonight.
for soups. Yes.
Oh my gosh, okay. They're just
So
sitting up in my closet waiting for Armageddon.
yeah, no, I love using those for soups in part because it saves me so much chopping, slicing, and dicing. And
Yeah.
the other thing is I can either make like single serve if I just need something for one person, or I can make a bigger container if I want to make, enough for a couple people for a couple of days.
Okay, good.
So I've gotten to where I take my freeze-dried onions that are chopped and I just throw it in with my meat as I'm cooking it and sauteing it, and it bounces up. And yeah, it saves so much time, tastes great. Those that don't like the texture of onions, they don't even know I put onion in. It's wonderful. So, and I wanted to comment on the honey for wound care.
Yep. Oh, that's
It is
right.
a
You're a nurse.
it
What?
is it has become a standard practice in our wound care.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
we use it often. It's great for debriding. It's great for it got healing properties. Yeah, we use it quite frequently actually.
Wow. Good to know.
And
That's
the
great.
reason your kids under a year cannot have honey is their immune systems aren't fully developed, and there's a lot of enzymes and uh,
Mm.
different things that bees have picked up that they
Mhm.
might not be able to fight off. So that's my
Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's great. I will share if you're storing honey, I do store two kinds of honey. I have regular honey that I use for food uses. And then I also make sure that I always have at least one full jar and one open jar of Manuka honey. Manuka honey is highly antibiotic, only comes from New Zealand where the Manuka bush grows. And there you can get different amounts of UMF, which is whatever the rating is for the healing property. But if you have a cough, a cold, some kind of upper respiratory thing or whatever, adding, I've actually used it if I've had upper respiratory, like sinusy things as well. It's
Oh,
really good to help heal that. Just adding a little bit of that to your system is adding the antibiotic properties. So I'll add a spoonful of honey to like a cup of tea or a cup of hot water with lemon. Yes, Donna.
I have two more questions. Um,
Absolutely.
coffee.
Mhm.
Coffee beans, do they last longer than ground coffee?
As long as they're still sealed. And
Hmm.
so the important thing is they need to be vacuum sealed.
Hmm.
Uh, I would actually have to look that up though because of the oils, coffee. I will look that up and I will put the answer in the notes.
Okay, good. Because we have
I
bags.
don't, yeah, I
We,
don't drink
we live
coffee.
4 hours from a Costco and Ken comes home with gobs of coffee beans and we go through them really fast, but I just was
Yeah.
he says not to freeze them. He's more of a coffee aficionado than I am, so they're just in the pantry, but when you talked about coffee in the vacuum sealed bags, I wondered if beans last longer than ground. They probably do.
And I would just have to look it up. So ground, the oils have already been expressed out, so they're not there as long. And so I don't know, and I don't drink coffee, so
Mhm.
I miss it, but it doesn't agree with me anymore. Um, I don't know how long you can store it for, so I will research that and get back to you. That's a great question.
Okay, thanks. My other question doesn't have to do with food storage, but you made me think about this, and I've been wanting to ask you when you talked about not storing oils for longer than 6 months, which is, thank you so much, because I buy those giant avocado oil things from Costco and I won't do that anymore
Mhm.
because they last a year probably. I don't know. At any rate, so when people talk about taking your tired vegetables out of the fridge and making soup out of them, do those tired vegetables still have any nutrition left in them?
Great question. The answer is yes, and not as much. So, part of the challenge is when we bring fresh vegetables home from the grocery store, they're beginning to lose nutritional quality just by sitting in our freezer or
Nice.
refrigerator, rather.
Yeah.
However, there is still nutritional value there, and they're also a healthy source of good fiber for our body, which is great. And so there is some value in using them. Generally, what I like to do is I have a jar of soup vegetables that are freeze dried. So I will chop up a whole bunch of veggies, like take the bottom of the freezer and throw it into a stir fry or throw it into a soup or whatever. I will rehydrate a handful of soup veggies, and it's the veggie stew from Augson's. I'll put that in there too. That's what I call my soup vegetables. And I throw a handful of that in there because freeze-dried food, the flavor and the nutrition is locked in by the freeze drying process. But I don't want to waste the food, so I would rather use it and just give it a little bump by adding a handful of rehydrated soup veggies.
If we
Plus,
lived,
I'm
we'd
like,
go to the grocery store every day on our way home from work, I mean, and
yeah.
bring what we're having for dinner, but we don't do that here.
Mhm. Well, I do find, especially at this time of year, my stir fries and soups become my favorite thing because I just kind of look, the other day, for example, I saw that I had a little bit of cabbage and some spring onions that were looking less than prime. So I shredded those and I actually added a tomato and then sauteed all of that and then scrambled in a couple of eggs and made a breakfast bowl with it. Because I would rather use it than not use it.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thanks.
Yeah. So there is still some nutritional value, just not as much.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
I have a question
Yes, Sean.
about the oils. I have a friend that stores her olive oil once it's, longer than 6 to 12 months. She stores it in the refrigerator. When you interviewed him, did he comment on that?
He did not.
I just
One
wondered if
of
you've ever heard of that.
yeah, so I have in sort of in a sideways fashion, I make almost all of our salad dressings and I use olive oil in them. And the better quality olive oil, man, once it gets cold, it turns solid.
Right.
And so I know that it does that. I can look and see if does I'm just writing
And
this
that's what she
down.
said. She said it turns solid, but then when you take it out, then it, goes back to a liquid. Um, but anyways, I just wondered if that's a good way because I know I have some olive oil that I've been using that's definitely more than 6 months old. So what you're saying is that it's rancid in
Well, he
and
just says, he says that it's lost some of the polyphenol qualities and it can go rancid after 6 months. So he really
Okay.
doesn't recommend keeping it for a long period of time.
okay. And then on the vinegar, when you were talking about that, to make sure the vinegar is non-GMO, like if you're just buying vinegar for cleaning, are we
Mhm.
going to inhale some of that? Like, are we taking in GMOs if we're just using regular vinegar from Costco in our cleaning?
You know, I guess my thought on that is that depending on what surfaces it's on, if you're doing any food prep or anything else like that, and this is admittedly like taking it far out, but
Yeah,
I try really hard to not do that. I don't want it in my house. I don't want it to possibly get on things. You know, I put my cutting board on there, and the way I use my cutting board sometimes is I chop the dry things on one side, I wipe it down, and then I flip it over to the runnel side to do wet things, you know, so like
yeah.
I'm turning it over and it's been on a surface that's been cleaned with that. So I
So
prefer not to.
yeah, I've never seen vinegar with the non-GMO. Are you talking about buying vinegar that has the non-GMO verified symbol, or does it say non-GMO on it somewhere? And do you have any recommended brands? Because I use a ton of vinegar in cleaning in my house.
Yeah, and so it is possible to get organic distilled vinegar.
Okay.
And so that would be the way. I have not as yet seen a non-GMO label on vinegar yet either,
Okay.
but I do see organic vinegar.
Okay. So, all right, that's really good to know. I had no idea.
And actually, do they have, okay, let me check
Yeah,
some.
and you had asked earlier about, what do we store? Like I have I used to store everything in number 10 cans for
Right,
all my long-term storage, and then I just found that I wasn't really using it and rotating it like I needed to. So I I went to the where you take the air out, the
right.
those kind of packages. And so like I have miso and beans and like oat groats, einkorn wheat. I really narrowed down to, I have honey, of course, but I really narrowed down to storing them in smaller packages and
Yeah,
like in a big bin rather than in a big container. I used to have the big white buckets also that I stored my wheat and rice, but I'd lost too many things, millet's gone bad. Um, Anyways, so I just find that storing them in the um smaller containers, like you said, the quart jars, anything like that, and putting them in a big bin in my basement
mhm.
just works better for me. That's what I've learned over the last, 30, 40 years of storing stuff.
And I will share also, you know, our needs change. And so
Yes.
it allows us to be a little more flexible if we are willing to use smaller containers in our everyday pantry and store the bigger stuff in our preparedness pantry or our overflow. You know, for example, at one point when we lived in Vermont, I was, then this was back when I ate gluten, but I was baking all of our bread. I was buying flour from the restaurant supply store in 100-pound bags.
Right.
And, you know, because I was making 3 loaves of bread a week and I would make multi types of bread. So I would have 100 pounds of wheat, 100 pounds of rye, and, you know, maybe 50 pounds of barley flour, 50 pounds or 25 pounds of oat flour. Like I had all these bags, but we were eating differently then. Now we tend to, we're, you know, more into as much fresh food as we can and not as much of the other things. But even if I were still baking that much, I would still want to have a smaller container because it's going to last longer. And the other thing is those white buckets that you're talking about. And so those are probably 5-gallon buckets, I'm assuming they were.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
5 gallon, yes.
And so 5-gallon buckets with the spin lids. I love those. Those lids are insect proof, watertight, rodent proof, like they're fabulous. As
Yeah.
long as there is no infestation in what you're putting in it, your stuff does not get anything. And so I loved that when we had a lot, because I had things in 25-gallon buckets all over the place. Because man, you get one pantry moth infestation and a lot
Yeah.
of your starchy stuff is off.
Yeah. And another thing that I store, that I have is, for if the power goes out, I have a hand grinder. So because I have an electric grinder, but I have a hand grinder, and then I also have a hand like mixer. It's like a bowl that has, it's almost looks kind of like a salad spinner, if you will, but it's a hand mixer to like
Yeah.
do a dough.
Yeah.
And so that I know, and I have a Dutch oven that fits inside of a Dutch oven, so that the bigger one can be the oven and the smaller one can have the food. And so
Mhm.
those are all things that I have in place in case we lose power.
Yeah. And that's great. I've never heard of the Dutch oven inside a Dutch oven trick. That's great. Uh, the other thing that you can do sometimes if you're looking to cook something in a power out situation, there is a product called a Wonder Bag. And the Wonder Bag is where you would heat whatever it is in a pot or Dutch oven or something. It does have to be a closed container, so it's got to have a lid on it.
Right.
Then you put it inside this insulated Wonder Bag and it continues to cook because the heat doesn't dissipate. I'll put a link to one of those in the,
Okay.
yeah.
That's cool. Great.
And one
Thank you,
thing
Mira.
I've been looking at, although they're very expensive, so I haven't bought one yet, but I would like to get it and learn how to use it, especially living where I live. We have a lot of sun most of the year. Is a sun oven. So it's a box with a glass lid and the inside is black. So it absorbs the heat and you can actually cook food in those.
And I will tell you, when I was at Costco on Friday, they had them on sale at Costco. I do not remember how
Sun
much they were.
ovens?
A sun oven. Yes, at my
What?
Costco. So you could go to Costco.com and
I gotta
probably,
look.
yeah, check it out. But I saw that because that's been on my bucket list too. I would like to get a sun oven as well,
Yeah,
just to have. But yeah, those are some of my long-term, and of course the 100-hour candles and, those kind of things as well.
yeah.
And do
And
you know
actually,
how long you can store Manuka honey? Because I have regular honey stored, but I don't have Manuka honey stored.
it's indefinite. Honey
Okay,
is good
just like
for,
honey. Okay, yeah,
yeah,
just like
honey is
honey.
good
Okay,
for,
good to
yep.
know. Do you use the 20 UMF?
So I alternate between the 20 and the 30, depending on
Okay,
usually what's on sale.
okay,
Because what happens is when like the jar that we have right now has, I don't know, about this much left in it. When I finish it, I will open the other one and then I will go hunting to find a full jar because I always want to have a full jar on hand.
right,
The
great.
other thing that I was going to mention, by the way, the calendar is
I've
out.
got mine.
You got yours.
Yeah,
Yay.
it's in the other room. I was going to bring it in and show it. Yes, I got mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad. Thank you. So one of the
Mhm.
things I was going to mention is there's a bunch of new stuff in there this year. I stopped putting the meetings in there because it confused people who were not part of the membership. But I added some new tasks, and one of the new tasks is make a meal using non-perishables from your pantry, or yeah, just make a meal. So once a month, I want you to make something from your pantry to build that skill. We want to learn how to do that so that we're not stuck all of a sudden power's out, grocery store's unavailable, whatever's going on, something has interrupted your ability to go to the store and get fresh food. I want you to learn how to use what you have if all you had was what was in that preparedness pantry. So once a month, we're going to practice. And I would love it if we would share, in the group or on social media, whatever you're comfortable with, but to share and say, hey, made my meal, and go from there. What do you think of the pictures, Donna?
They're beautiful, and the quotes are great too.
Thank
Yeah, they're
you.
good quotes. I have two more questions about storing food.
Yes.
You guys keep. Okay, so nuts. I
Mhm.
just opened up some nuts that I had soaked and put them in my morning thing, my concoction. And I thought, oh boy, these need to, I don't know how long they've been here. They need to be in the freezer. So I know that. Right? I mean,
Yes.
is there a time limit on them even in the freezer?
Well, so they apparently a lot of people prefer that you keep them in the refrigerator rather than the freezer, because I guess the
Oh,
freezer changes the quality of the nuts.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I learned that. So I have someone that I know who owns Houston Pecan Company. So she and I had a conversation at one point. She's like, I really don't like when people store them in the freezer. Now, technically, according to the USDA, they're good for a year in the freezer and they're good for 6 months in the refrigerator.
Okay.
According to Toby, who owns Houston Pecan Company, putting them in the freezer changes something about the nuts. And so they prefer that you keep them in the refrigerator, not in the freezer.
Okay, good to know. My other question is, when we were talking about flour and you were buying 100 pounds of flour, wow. I have recently started buying flour from Barton Springs Mill in Dripping
Nice.
Springs.
Yeah.
And it's so outstandingly wonderful and totally better even than organic. I've met the owner and I've been there, so I'm really sold on it. Um, but I have read I mean, I learned from you, Mira, to put flour in the freezer for at least a day to kill any bugs that are in it. But
Yeah.
they say because it has all the bran and endosperm in it that we need to store it in the freezer. So
Okay.
that was
And
new.
I will share that I usually so yes, put it in the freezer for at least 24 hours. We want to kill anything that's in there, and the extreme cold of the freezer will do that because there is nothing worse than bringing home a bag of something and opening it for the first time to discover it's all webby inside. And that was not your fault. And it happens all the time. It does not mean you don't have a clean house. It does not mean there's a problem with you. It's just that's nature and food. Uh, I do tend to store it once I it depends on what it is, I guess. But for a lot of things, once it's open, I store it in the refrigerator and I try to use it within 6 months.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I didn't have a question. I was just
Yeah. No, I
sharing.
love that you found a mill that you like, though. That's wonderful.
Well, you are not very far away from it and they
That's
mail
right. I'll
everything.
have to go visit. Maybe
But
there's a field trip in that.
yeah, heirloom grains, they're quite amazing. But I know people who have had issues with gluten and they don't have with this flour. But
Yeah.
I use it at Blackwood Educational Land Institute, and the kids there that have gluten issues have no issues with this.
Mm.
Something to check out. Plus, they have really good cornmeal too, and rye
Hmm.
and other things.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's very cool.
What was the
Hey,
name of that
It's
place
called
again?
Barton Springs Mill.
Okay, thank
They
you.
have connections with farmers all over Oklahoma and Texas who grow heirloom grains.
Mm.
Um, and like I said, I met the owner. I've been out there with my friend Kath, and he gave me a dozen reasons why their flour is even better, even than organic flour in the grocery store. And I never wrote them down, and I was so sorry that I didn't, but I'm sold anyway because even grocery store flour can have chemicals in it. So
Mhm. Yeah.
apparently, so it's great. Barton Springs Mill. It's not cheap, and shipping that, you got to pay a lot for shipping because it's heavy.
Yeah,
It's fabulous and it's delicious.
that sounds great.
Mira, I have another question.
Yes.
When you say that the freezer changes the quality of the nuts, what about nuts that are straight from the farmer that have not gone under any kind of pasteurization, flash pasteurization, any of that? Because the reason why I ask is I've been storing, and I have some in the refrigerator, but then I also have, that's the majority of, I have a freezer in the garage, and the majority of what's in there is
Mhm.
Refrigerator and freezer is nuts. So, and I've been storing I store them for long, a year. I even have some that have been longer than a year, and
Mhm.
they taste and smell just fine. But I was just curious. But mine comes straight from the farmer, so they have not been treated by anything.
So that probably is helping a lot because what you're getting is truly raw. It's
Yes.
difficult to get truly raw at the grocery store. Even grocery store nuts that say raw
Yep.
have
They're not.
usually been right at least pasteurized in some way because the FDA requires that. So that probably helps. The 1 year mark is considered ideal. It doesn't mean that beyond that it's inedible. It's just the potential is there for there to be less nutritional value, for it to not behave the same way if you're, turning it into a nut butter or a nut milk or whatever, or even just, baking it to eat. So when I'm mentioning the dates, that's considered the ideal date within
Got you.
that time frame. It's like with spices. Most spices, and there is a spices handout in the library, um, if you wanted to go get it. Most spices can be good up to 2 years. They will still be okay after that, but chances are that, maybe they're a little discolored because they've oxidized. They might not have as strong an odor. I mean, you can put your nose in it, and go, still smells like rosemary. But then you
Yeah.
take a fresh container of rosemary and you smell that and you're like, oh, big difference, kind of thing. So it's still good. It's still usable. It's just not optimal.
Got you. Thank you, Mira.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? This has been a good one, guys. I had no idea. All
Thanks, Mira. Bye,
right.
everybody.
Thank you all so much. It was really great to see you. And I hope you have a great, great day. And then we're meeting next week. And so we will have a holistic wellness kitchen table chat next week. And I will see you then.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye,
Great.
folks.
Bye.